You said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. Our feet are standing in your gates, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is built like a city that is closely compacted together. That is where the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, to praise the name of the Lord, according to the statute given to Israel. There stand the thrones of judgment, the thrones of the house of David.
Okay. How does a place become sacred? How is it that a particular rock or tree becomes a holy thing? There's a writer that I follow on Substack, just kind of half-heartedly. He's an English writer. He lives in Ireland right now. And every Sunday, he makes a pilgrimage to a different holy or sacred well in Ireland. Because apparently these things are everywhere. They're just scattered all across Ireland. So how does that kind of thing happen? How does something become holy or sacred like that? I think ultimately, it's pretty simple. Something has to happen there. Something has to occur in that place for it to become sacred, right? So a rock becomes holy because some god rested his head on it one time, or a field becomes sacred when a decisive battle is fought there, or a stadium becomes sacred when a team wins something there. Go Cubs. And once a thing is sacred, people want to see it. People make pilgrimage to it. Now, I'm going to show you a picture, and it is not the picture that I wanted. This is supposed to be a picture of me holding a book looking really dorky in front of these falls, but these are Patterson Falls in Patterson, New Jersey. When I was in college, I was obsessed with William Carlos Williams. He's a poet, and he wrote this epic poem called Patterson, which is based on the city, and the falls feature very prominently in it. So I made a little pilgrimage out there with some friends and wanted to see this thing that I had read so much about. And I think there's something very right about this inclination that we have to do this, to make pilgrimage, to go see things. We implicitly sense that places matter. We know deep down that everywhere is not anywhere. Rather, there's a bunch of somewheres. There are unique, distinct places. And that is good. And funny enough, that's what the poem Patterson is kind of all about. But lo and behold, we are somewhere right now. We have all made the decision to make pilgrimage, to get in our cars, or for those of you in Tribeca, to walk over here, and to come to this place at this time. By this time, I mean 10:10, of course. You got to be fashionably late. People all over the world have made the same decision and are doing what we're doing right now. They have come to church. So the question is, why? What makes this place, what we are doing here together, sacred? What makes it worth the pilgrimage? What happens here in this time and in this place that can't happen anywhere else? That is the question that we're going to be tracking down and investigating this morning. And we're going to do that because I think that's exactly what Psalm 122 lays out for us. As Aaron said, this is a psalm that's in a collection called the Psalms of Ascent that are all about pilgrimage. It's all about God's people going up to Jerusalem to worship him. And this psalm, I think, gives the rationale for that. It explains it. And by implication, I think it can tell us what it is we're doing here, why this time is so important. Now, this poem has 3 parts, and 3 is going to be a really important number today, but it's split up into 3 different sections. And in this first section, what we're going to see is that what we're doing here is gathering together, and that is the prerequisite for everything else that happens. The prerequisite for what we're doing here being sacred is that we are here together. We have gathered together. So if you have your Bibles, grab them. We're going to be in Psalm 122 the whole time, except for one brief look elsewhere. I want to look at the first 2 verses with you that's going to show us this centrality of gathering. The psalmist writes, "I rejoiced with those who said to me, 'Let us go to the house of the Lord. Our feet are standing in your gates, Jerusalem.'" Now, this first part is what I would call exposition, which means we're dropped into the world of the psalm. We're introduced to the characters and the places. And what we have is we have a narrator, I, who is spoken to by someone else and invited on this pilgrimage to go to the house of Yahweh, which is the temple, which is in Jerusalem. And then in verse 2, we have a huge jump in time and space, and we skip the whole pilgrimage part, and suddenly they're standing in the very gates of Jerusalem looking at the city. They're there. They've arrived. And we're going to do something very nerdy here, okay? So bear with me. We're going to look at some grammar, all right? You guys with me? Okay, so we are going to do what grammarians would call constituent tracking, which is when you look at the nouns in a particular poem, so the persons, places, things, or ideas, and you see what the author does with them. Like, what verbs does he make them the subject of or the object of or whatever. I've already lost some of you, but just track with me here for a second. Okay, so first thing, as we look at verse 1, direct your eyes to your Bibles or here. What's the first noun that we see here? It's I. Yes, I rejoiced when, and then all of a sudden we run into another noun. When they. I rejoiced when they said, and then back to our first noun, me. We have I and we have they. But something really incredible happens in the second half of verse 1. I and they disappear, and all of a sudden, they're combined. We have us. I and they have become we. If you are a camp counselor, you might say that purpling has just happened. Yes, I see some hands back there. But this is a really incredible moment. The poet is illustrating in the very grammar of the opening of this poem, and it continues throughout, what pilgrimage actually is. It is a gathering. It is I joining with they to become we. And this is crucial, because what the narrator of the psalm is doing, what we're doing right now, cannot happen unless a bunch of I's leave where they are and go to be with them, they, so that we might all become us. Only then, if the I's leave, is there the possibility of an us. Or to say it another way, we've got to come to church. Like that is the prerequisite for what happens here. It really is that simple. What we are doing here together is actually diminished when not all of us are here. Later in the psalm, we'll see this. The psalmist says that the gathering of God's people in this way to Jerusalem, that it was an ordinance. It was a command for the people of Israel. And in many ways, it's similar for us. In Hebrews, in the New Testament, the author there will tell the people to not forsake the gathering. Don't forsake coming together, because it is the prerequisite for everything else that we do here, for the sacredness of it. It's all based on the fact that we have actually come together, that a bunch of disparate people from disparate places, I's and they's, have come here to become we, to become us. Now, there's another implication here too, though. I told my hospitality team last time that we got together, so this would be the people that greet you at the door and the ushers and the coffee servers, that if there was anything in this psalm that had to do with hospitality, that I would mention it. And there is something here. Did you notice what it is that prompts this pilgrimage in the first place? It's an invitation. The psalmist, the speaker, is invited to go on this pilgrimage. Now, I think that's really important for us, not only because it gives us the idea that we should invite other people, that we should invite our neighbors to church. That's important, yes, but I think it's important even while we are here, when we've actually come and already gathered. That it's not just about inviting people before we get here, but once we get here, being inviting. We can all be in the same place and still just be a collection of I's and they's. It actually takes effort and intentionality to become we, to become us. It takes invitation. It takes introducing yourself to someone you don't know. It takes being open to forming new relationships and to forming friendships, however difficult that might be. It takes making someone else feel welcome and opening up the possibility that they might become one of us. Invitation is what begins pilgrimage. So let's review here just really quickly. We're asking the question of what is it that makes this time and this space sacred? Why have we come here, and what is it that we do here that can't happen anywhere else? And what we've seen so far is that whatever might make this sacred, our gathering together and actually coming and becoming a people is the prerequisite for that. We're gathering as members of God's kingdom, followers of Jesus, and that sets everything else up. But clearly that's not enough. There has to be something that we're doing here together for it to really be a time that's set apart, for it to be sacred, for it to be important and significant. So what are we doing together? And in the next part of this poem, in part 2 of 3, the psalmist is going to lay that out. He's going to tell us what it is that happens in the midst of our gathering that makes this space sacred. And what he's going to say, and this is a large part of our big idea this morning, is that the church's gathering is where God's people come together to praise and to pay tribute to his king. I'm going to say that again. The church's gathering is where God's people come together to praise and to pay tribute to his king. So look at verses 3 through 5 with me. Look at the second part of this psalm here. Jerusalem is built like a city that is closely compacted together. And it is where the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, to praise the name of the Lord according to the statute given to Israel. There stand the thrones for judgment, the thrones of the house of David. There's some really fun things here poetically. So we ended the last section with a mention of Jerusalem, and we start this one with another mention of Jerusalem. We'll get one more in the final section, the third section, for a total of 3. There's our number again. Jerusalem is the focus of what's happening here. It's what's being described. And when a person who spoke Hebrew heard the word Jerusalem, they'd be hearing 2 parts to that. So you kind of have to say it in the Hebrew pronunciation to hear it. But Yerushalayim or Yerushalayim, there's 2 parts. There's the Yer part, ear, city, and then there's Shalom or Shalayim, which sounds like shalom, peace. And so there was this understanding when people heard the word that it sounds like city of peace. And that's probably not the actual etymology of the word. It seems to predate Israel and everything, but it works. The sound is there. When people hear Jerusalem, they think this is a city of peace. And what's so incredible about this psalm, this poem, is that it takes the sounds of this word, and it breaks it apart to create a whole poem. So in this section that we're in section 2, we're going to be looking at the city aspect of it. What is Jerusalem like as a city? He's going to describe it as a city. And when we get into the third section, we're going to be talking all about peace. And so he's broken apart this word and expanded it to create the psalm before us, the poem, which is all about Jerusalem. Just a really cool thing. So let's remember where we are in terms of the kind of story of this poem. The psalmist is now standing with this group that he's joined in the gates of Jerusalem, and he's looking at the city. So what is the city like? It is closely compacted together. He's standing here, finally arrived at the city, and he's looking at its architecture, and that architecture is just resonant with meaning for him and symbolic meaning. That even in the way this city is designed, that it has a plan, that it's unified, that it's not a whole bunch of buildings designed in one style and one way over here and then others over here. This thing is actually formed together, and it's coherent. Things are tightly bound. The houses are connected to the wall surrounding. The temple is in the center, and everything else is around it. That even the architecture of this place tells the psalmist something basic and important, because it tells him that the people who dwell here are unified, and that in that there is strength. And it's also this symbol of God's protection over this city. The walls remind him of God's protection and his care for his people. So what's happening here is that, I and they have come together on this pilgrimage to become us, to become we. And when he gets there, he's getting an even greater understanding of who we actually are. For him, the tribes of Israel, these people, they're unified. They're a unified people. They share something in common. They are strong in their unity. They're bounded together, and they are under the protection of their God. And even just the way that this city is built, him looking at it, is starting to tell him all this. And that continues as then he turns his gaze from the architecture to the people who are flooding into the city. Because this is where the tribes go up. These 12 disparate tribes from different places, and they're parts of different families, they all come and they unite here in this city, in Jerusalem. They are the tribes of the Lord. Seeing all these people come together into this city and overwhelm it is this powerful experience and this symbol for the psalmist. He is seeing them actually come and be physically united as one nation, Israel. Even though there's 12 tribes, even though they are not always together, when they come to Jerusalem, they know they are one people, and they are one people who are Yahweh's people. They are the tribes of Yahweh. And we're going to do a little activity here to try and capture some of this, okay? Because this is a powerful experience for the psalmist as he journeys to this place and he sees people flooding in and overwhelming the city, and it's telling him something essential about who he is, that he's part of a people, that he's part of us, he's part of we, like he has something he belongs to. And I want us to try and get the same sense of what we're actually doing here right now. So we're going to bring the house lights up for just a minute, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to look around at the other people that are here, right? The people that have flooded this place and driven here and filled this parking lot. Like, you are a part of something. You are part of a people that has pilgrimaged here to do something important. So just take a second, look at each other. It's like the weird thing you do at weddings where they have the bride and the groom look at all the people who are here. But just for a minute, do it. Because listen, this could become, if we really think about this rightly, this could become a symbol for us each and every week of who we are. Seeing those cars come in off 137 and come into this parking lot, seeing people flood into this place, should be this reminder to us of who we are, that we are a unified people, that there's strength in that unity, that we are under God's protection and his care. We don't have to wait for once a year or 3 times a year. We do this every week, and we can see that we're a church, that we're together. Thank you, Emmett. I appreciate you doing that. But what is it really that unifies these people? That's the question. And the psalmist has intentionally kind of withheld this through a large part of the poem. He's building this tension, and he's talking about all the unity of the architecture in the place, that it's tightly held together, the unity of the people, that they're from 12 different tribes and different places, but they're all converging upon this city, and we're wondering, what is it that brings them here? What is it that unifies them? And finally, he tells us, it is to praise Yahweh, to praise their God. And because it is there that his thrones for judgment, the throne of his king, is placed. The people are there. They are unified. The mortar and the glue that just holds them together and draws them in from all these other places is the praise of their God, worship and submission to their king, paying tribute to the person that God has anointed and put over them. The church's gathering is where God's people come together to praise and to pay tribute to his king. And so if that's the glue that holds us together, right? If that's what we are actually here to do, is to worship and to praise our God and also to pay tribute to our king, to swear our allegiance to King Jesus, then I think it makes sense to figure out what exactly praise is. What is worship, if that's what's drawn us all here together? So generally speaking, I think we would say that worship is to attribute worth to something. You can hear that in the word itself. It's to recognize something's value and its power, its might, its goodness, its wisdom, its significance, whatever. And this brings us back to where we started when we were talking about what makes things sacred, what makes them holy. A rock is sacred because some god rested his head there, and then people journey to that rock to give it the worth that it deserves for having been graced with the divine presence. But likewise, our gathering is sacred because it is when we collectively attribute worth to our God. It's when we recognize his power, his grace, his judgment, his goodness, his mercy, when we together as a people speak that recognition back to him. And there's a basic point here that's a little bit of a side. It's not in the psalm, but I think it's important to make. And that's that it's not about us, our worship. That's not the orientation of what we do here. It's not about some experience we're having. It's not about getting a particular feeling or having a moment when we're singing. The arrow is pointed the other way. It's primarily about what we are saying to God. We are attributing his greatness and his holiness and his goodness back to him. We're recognizing it. We're giving back to him his gifts in the form of worship and praise, in song, in word, in deed. And so, that does something to our preferences a little bit. It makes them a little less important. It's not about some experience that we're having. It's not about just all of us, I's and they's, having subjective feelings in this moment. No, it's about what we're saying to God, who we're recognizing him to be together as one body and as one church. So let's get back to our main point here. We said that what makes something sacred is what happened there. It's kind of been the premise. But Jerusalem is a little unique in this respect, that it kind of bucks the trend of that sacredness. Now, there's some important things that happen there, you know? It's where the ark ultimately ends up for God's people. It's where he allows Solomon to build the temple so that his presence is going to dwell there. But if we look at Israel's history, there are plenty of other, probably better candidates for sacred sites. All right, so let's just go through the list here. There's the Red Sea, where God splits the sea so that his people can walk through and then destroys the Egyptians who are following them. Like, that's a pretty good candidate for a sacred site in Israel's history. Let's go beyond that. Mount Sinai, where God reveals himself to his people in this cloud where he speaks to them audibly, gives them his law, and where they're really formed as a people. You would think that would be at the top of the list for like sacred sites in Israel and where there would be importance. But none of those places even pales in comparison to Jerusalem's importance and to what the people do there. In fact, when they're established in the land, God forbids them from worshiping and from sacrificing anywhere else. All the other sites that would have been sacred and holy, he says you can't attribute that kind of worth to them. You can't go and sacrifice there. You can't worship there. You have to worship here in Jerusalem. So why is that? Why does it take on such significance? Well, Jerusalem is where God chose to have his presence remain. But perhaps even more than that, Jerusalem is sacred because of what will happen there. Because of what will happen there. We're going to go away from the psalm for just a second. I want you to turn to Isaiah chapter 2, okay? We're going to look at the first few verses of Isaiah chapter 2. And I want you to listen for the language of the psalm. There's a lot of overlap here. But look at the time frame and look at who's involved in this. Isaiah chapter 2, starting in verse 1. This is what Isaiah, son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and all nations, not just the tribes, all nations will stream to it. Many peoples will come and say, and this should sound familiar, "Come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways so that we may walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. And they will beat their swords into plowshares." Whoops. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war any longer. What makes Jerusalem sacred is that it is where God will do something. It is where he will bring about ultimate justice and ultimate peace and ultimate righteousness, where he will call to himself not just the tribes, but the nations. That there will be one new humanity, new people that is reconciled to one another and reconciled to God. And it is where God will enact people's salvation in the fullest sense of the word. And what this means is that each time Israel goes up to praise and to submit itself to that God who will do that, it is reenacting the future in the present. It's anticipating what will come. It is rehearsing. It's doing a rehearsal for what is coming. And so Israel's worship and our worship takes on this kind of double focus. It attributes worth to God both for what he has done, for how he's created them as a people, for the ways that he's saved them, and we do the same. We look back to the cross. We look back at what God has done, but it looks forward to what he will do and how he will finish his work. That is exactly what we are doing here when we gather, and that is what makes our gathering sacred. We are rehearsing for the future of what we hear about in the Revelation of John, the wedding supper of the Lamb, that when that day comes, We will be joined with our King and our Lord, our groom, in an eternal celebration of his triumph over evil and death at the cross, where he defeated and paid for our sins. And that day, as we hear, people from every tribe and every tongue and every nation will say in one voice that Jesus is Lord and that God has won the victory. And so today, as we sing, as we lift our voices, as we eat his body and his blood and partake in this feast, which we're going to do after this, we're rehearsing for who we will be in the future, for what God will do in the future. We're rehearsing for that coming meal, and we're doing it in a way that can only happen here when we're together. You can't do this on your couch. You can't do this in the morning when you're reading the Bible in your bedroom. You can't do this in the evening when you say your prayers, because we are a people. We are one people. And as a people, we are a living symbol of what God is going to do and what the future of people actually is. That God is making a new humanity that is reconciled to one another from every tribe and every tongue and every nation. And when we come together from the disparate places that we do and the different backgrounds and all these things, we are meant to be a living symbol of that future reality. We're meant to rehearse that now, to start working on that now. You can't do that alone. That is what's so unique about what we're doing here and now. We are rehearsing for who we will be in the future when we are fully reconciled to one another and when we're reconciled to God. We're rehearsing for a wedding. We're rehearsing for a feast. This is why we don't say, like, oh, you should, take communion as part of your devotionals, your daily devotionals. No, this is something that we do together. The church's gathering is where God's people come together to praise and to pay tribute to his King. But it is only a rehearsal for now. We still live in the present evil age. And so the other part of what we're doing here when we gather is that we are swearing our allegiance to our King in the midst of a lot of other competing allegiances that exist in our world. In the face of everything else that seems to be in control and to reign over us, every government, every addiction, every institution, every algorithm or ideology or identity, we come here to say no to them and to say yes to our King, to Jesus. To say that Jesus is King and I am his vassal. We are his vassals together, and we gather to declare that to ourselves, to one another, and to the watching world, as we are this symbol for them of what humanity is to become, of what God will do. The church's gathering is where God's people come together to praise and to pay tribute to his King. And that's also why we read from God's word and why we hear it preached on Sunday mornings. We are coming under his authority, the authority of his King, rather than any other authority that would tell us what life is all about, what it means, what our responsibilities are, what it means to love, what it means to obey. Okay, we have one more part of this poem. We've been through the first two sections. We've got to do the third section here. And it's going to end how we began, with a mention of Yahweh's temple. And in that way, it's bookended by mentions of the temple. It's enclosed by the temple, which is this really nice kind of physical picture, this word picture of where this psalm would be sung. That it would be sung on the way, but once they get to the temple as well. And in the psalm, you actually see that represented, that it begins with the temple, it ends with the temple. It's as if the whole thing takes place in it. It's just a nice little poetic detail. And the divine name, Yahweh's name, is mentioned, I'll let you guess how many times in this poem. 3 times, yes. It looks like it's mentioned 4, but one of them, the author actually intentionally shortens from Yahweh to Yah, so that there's a perfect 3, 1 in each section of this poem. And like we said, the last part of this poem is all about peace. It's the second half of Jerusalem, city of peace. Would you like to guess how many times peace is mentioned in the last section? It's 3 times, yes. And this is where we see kind of the whole idea of this psalm and what the implication is of our gathering. We've been told why we gather, what it is that binds us together, but what does that do for the rest of our time, for the rest of our weeks? We're here on one day for 1 hour. What does what difference does it make for the rest of our days? And this is what I think the psalmist says. The church's gathering is where God's people praise and pay tribute to his king. Therefore, God's people have a responsibility to pray for and to pursue the peace of the church. God's people have a responsibility to pray for and to pursue the peace of the church. Look at verses 6 through 9 with me, the last part of Psalm 122. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you be secure. May there be peace within your walls and security within your citadels. For the sake of my family and friends, I will say, peace be within you. For the sake of the house of Yahweh, our God, I will seek your prosperity. The psalmist's command is pretty straightforward here. Pray. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Pray for the peace of the church. Pray for one another. We have a responsibility to pray for one another and for our collective peace, because what we're doing here is so important. We are a living symbol to the world of what God has done in Jesus, of the way that he's reconciled us to himself, to one another, and to what he will do when Jesus returns to judge the earth, judge the nations. We're reenacting it week after week and month after month and year after year and millennia after millennia. And a central aspect of us actually doing that and being a real symbol to ourselves and to the world is that we are actually unified and at peace with one another. If we're supposed to represent what we will be, one new whole people from every tribe and every tongue at peace with one another, then if we're not at peace now, we are not actually being that symbol. And so there's a call to pray for one another, to pray for our peace. It's been said many times, it's hard to hate somebody when you are praying for them. It works on you. It does something to you. And as a people, we can't let things get between us that would prevent us from being here and coming together and representing what God has called us to represent, this new humanity of what he will do and what he's making people into. So let's do it. Let's act like the people that we are becoming. Let's drag out into the light whatever it is that we hide within us that keeps us from being at peace with one another. Let's confess those things and be done with them, to clear out our waste so that we can be what God has called us to be. Let's commit today to pray for each other, to pray for one another, to pray for our brothers and sisters here, and to pray for the global church as well. Because that's the other part of this, is that we are one manifestation of the church. We are a representative sample, but everywhere across the world, people are doing exactly what we are doing. And they are your people. Like, that's the us. That is the we. And we have a responsibility to pray for all of us, to pray for the church and to pursue its peace. You have an opportunity to do that today, just out in the lobby, to actually pursue the peace of a significant part of the church that needs peace from within and peace from without. And so I commend that to you. But as we close here, what I want us to do is to read this psalm one last time. We've looked at all the different parts. We've talked about some of its poetic features. We've seen what this psalm might mean for us as well. That the church's gathering is where God's people praise and pay tribute to his king. Therefore, God's people have a responsibility to pray for and pursue the peace of the church. So let's read this psalm together with that in mind and to reenact it. I'm going to read the parts here that say leader. You guys will read the parts that say people. And that's how we'll end our time together. I rejoiced with those who said to me, "Let us go to the house of the Lord." Our feet are standing in your gates, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is built like a city that is closely compacted together. That is where the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, to praise the name of the Lord according to the statute given to Israel. There stand the thrones of judgment, the thrones of the house of David. So pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you be secure. May there be peace within your walls and security within your citadels. For the sake of my family and friends, I will say, peace be within you. For the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek your prosperity. Amen.
And so as we enter into this table,